It had been a busy 5 days, during which many miles had been traveled. 20 minutes after returning home, I sat on the terrace in my favorite chair with a cup of dark nectar and reflected on how the twins were spending their first days of freedom. Miranda and I had just taken the journey that made us empty nesters, the same journey that thousands of other parents have taken or have taken in the last few days. I can guarantee that the rest of you didn't feel as good as I did in that moment. Since Luke was attending Georgia Institute of Technology, our first destination was Atlanta. We were also able to rent a car there, which meant we were no longer traveling in tandem. The next day, our daughter Kelly was taken to Gainesville to be a Gator, and her parents traveled a few miles farther east to Daytona Beach to relax for a few days. The next 3 days were filled with more sex than we had ever had in our marriage up to that point. Miranda was insatiable. We'd had children when we were only 18, which meant we were only 36, and our energy levels were still high. As I sat there indulging in pleasant memories, Miranda went upstairs to shower and freshen up. I was surprised when I heard the hairdryer kick on, which usually happened when she was getting ready for work or getting ready to go out. A few minutes later, I heard her waddling around the kitchen in her boots, another unusual sound since she usually walked around in closed-toed, rubber-soled shoes or barefoot. Before I could ponder the matter, she called out to me, "Alan, honey, could you sit with me for a minute? I need to have a little talk with you." Rising from my chair and carrying my empty mug, I replied, "On my way, darling." Entering the kitchen, I was shocked to see my wife sitting at the table, dressed in a fresh blouse and clean jeans, looking as good as ever. She poured me a fresh mug of coffee and set it down in front of her seat. I was perplexed as to what was going on, so I sat down in the chair she obviously wanted to sit me in. "What's going on, Miri?" I asked, taking a sip of the fresh brew. "I'm leaving you, Alan," she replied in a calm voice, picking up a large manila envelope. "These are divorce papers for you to look at and sign." She spoke and I was in shock. I was numb and couldn't get a word out. This came out of nowhere. Miri continued, "Everything is explained in the documents. I don't need anything from you. Everything I have left in the house is yours to use as you see fit. All savings and accounts have been divided or paid off so far, and I have destroyed all joint credit cards. I have notified everyone who needs to know about the change of address. Anything else you can relay through my attorney. I have also put a restraining order in place as I do not want any more contact with you after I leave. I have a new number and email, and all my old accounts are closed. Please don't cause problems with your kids by trying to get information from them, as they are aware of what is going on and will not help you. The same goes for my parents. I know you are going to ask, so I can tell you that I have been in a relationship with Dan for the last 13 years, and I hope my work husband will be my real husband. I love you, Alan. I just love Dan more. He's put up with long enough and deserves more commitment from me, so there you go." Miranda finished and left the table heading for the door, grabbing the small suitcase she had placed by the door. When she opened the front door, I finally found my voice. "Why?" Showing no emotion, she looked me straight in the eye and replied, "Sandy Thompson." With those words, she closed the door behind her. That was the last time I saw or spoke to Miranda for 16 months. The father at work was Dan Roberts, a man I had considered a friend for the past 18 years. Miri and Dan's wife Laura had become close during the pregnancy. They were close in age. Laura was 22 and Miri was 18. Their daughter Cassie was born the day after the twins, meaning the spouses ended up in neighboring beds. The initial friendship grew so close that they became inseparable, which of course meant that we husbands were drawn to each other as well. Soon the two families became like one family, as we were at each other's homes every weekend, and living 2 blocks away from each other was quite convenient. Before the oops moment that resulted in the birth of the twins, both Miri and I were going to college. Miri had always wanted to study business or business management, while I had a partial scholarship for baseball with a math major but no real direction. That all changed when Miri told me she was pregnant and I gave up all my hopes and dreams to get a job. Our parents were great to both of us. The wedding was booked and organized within 2 months. My parents had given birth to me very late in life, in their 30s, thinking they would always be childless, and gave me all the love and support a child could have. Miri had an older brother, 10 years older, so she didn't have much of a sibling relationship. Tom left for college before she was 8 years old and, except for a couple of flying visits, never came back. Unfortunately, he was killed in a car accident the year after she graduated from college. This caused her parents to give her the same attention they gave me. As a wedding gift, my parents gave me the deed to the family home as they were looking to move south, planning to retire in the next few years. I found a job at a local insurance company in sales and treated it like a duck to water. The pay was low, but the commissions could almost double my original salary. It meant long hours, usually 12 hours a day and sometimes weekends. Miri took a part-time job as a secretary, intending to still pursue higher education, but mostly online. This is where her parents' support became invaluable. When the twins were born, they started looking after our children and loved any excuse to go out with the grandchildren. It was 3 years later when the Sandy Thompson incident occurred. I was named Salesperson of the Year in the North Carolina region. Our small company had been purchased by a nationwide concern that believed in rewarding success. In addition to a $2,500 bonus, I received an all-expense-paid trip for 3 nights to Washington, D.C., where the company headquarters were located. The first night would be a gala dinner to determine the top salesperson of the year, followed by 2 days to myself. For Miri and I, this was our first solo vacation without the twins, and we were looking forward to it. 2 days before we left, Luke was sick with whooping cough and Kelly was sick the next day. Unfortunately, I had to attend, so Miri kissed me goodbye on Friday morning and insisted that I try to enjoy the next few days. Arriving an hour or so before the gala started, I had time to check in and let her know that I didn't have a chaperone with me. After showering and shaving, dressed in a rented tuxedo, I found my seat at the table and found that I was seated next to Sandy Thompson from our Little Rock office. While most of the people present were in their 30s or older, Sandy was a year older than my 21 and was in her first full year with the company. I had only had a few beers prior to this event, and here was a free open bar. At dinner, I had a couple glasses of wine. When the awards were announced, I was shocked to find that I had won Vendor of the Year. I was presented with a trophy and a check for $10,000, and when I returned to the table, the bosses graciously sent over a bottle of champagne. To be honest, the rest of the night passed like a blur until I woke up at 5 the next morning, lying next to a gorgeous, naked Sandy Thompson. Scared out of my wits, I went back to my room, packed my things, and was on my way home in 20 minutes. Miri, of course, was surprised to see me 4.5 hours later when I got home. She certainly wasn't very happy 10 minutes later when I explained that I had gotten drunk and slept in another girl's bed. The only thing she asked was what the girl's name was, and before I could explain anything else, she said she was going to her parents' house for a couple days. She packed a small bag and left the kids with me. For 3 days, she didn't return my calls and didn't want to see me. On Tuesday, I went to work, leaving the kids at the daycare we were using, and when I got home, she was there as if nothing had happened. When I tried to talk to her, she stopped me and told me that if I mentioned it again, she would take the kids and leave and never come back. It took many months before the intimacy returned, but eventually it did, and as she had requested, the incident was never spoken of again. The following year, Miri earned a business degree and wanted to find a job that would utilize her education. Our relationship with Dan and Lisa blossomed to the point where we spent every weekend with them, unless Dan's or my work got in the way. Of course, that didn't stop the girls from getting together either, although that was a different matter, since they had moved 15 miles away to be closer to Dan's work. Ironically, Miri's parents had moved to the same neighborhood to buy a bigger apartment so the grandkids would have space. They also started looking after Cassie, giving Dan and Lisa a little more freedom. Dan's company was growing quickly, and they needed an office manager, and he needed a personal assistant. It was perfect for Miri, and after interviewing with the managers, she got the job and loved it. She grew with the company and was always by Dan's side, hence the title Dan's Work Wife. All of this went on for 7 years, and then Lisa died suddenly and unexpectedly from a brain aneurysm. She was visiting me the day it happened, as she usually was when Dan and Miri had to travel. It was a disaster for all of us, especially Dan. He couldn't cope on his own, and certainly couldn't look after his 11-year-old daughter alone. The solution was for Miri to pop in for a couple of hours 3 days a week after work to make sure everything was clean and tidy and to prepare lunches that could be reheated. That's how I was persuaded. 16 months later. I was just coming out of the garage with the last box of stuff to load into the van when I saw her car pull up in the driveway. It was the first time she'd been back since she told me she wanted a divorce, and of course it was the last person I expected to see. When she got out of the car, I greeted her. "Miranda, aren't you violating a restraining order by being here?" My tone was even and neutral. "That stopped the day we got divorced. How are you?" I shrugged. "Living the dream? Want some coffee?" I was on my way back to the house. "That would be nice," she replied, following me. There was nothing in the house but a few boxes and a dining table. The appliances and one of the bedroom sets had been left to the new owners. Over the past few days, the sale of the contents of the house had gone very well. What was left went to the dump. The son of one of my former co-workers was going to do it for me the day before I exchanged my keys. His wife and her friend were also going to clean up the mess. There was a lone birthday card on the mantelpiece, as I had turned 38 a couple days ago, and the office staff had gotten together to send me 1 card each from everyone, as well as a good luck card that I had packed with my luggage. The company had been very kind to me, for I had worked there for over 19 years, and I was parting with good friends, but it had to be done. After making coffee, we sat down in the same seats we had 16 months ago. "So, why do I have the pleasure of enjoying your company on this fine day?" I asked. "The kids got letters about your move. Why didn't you call them? After all, you didn't have to send them by registered mail." Actually, I did, as it was the only way to confirm that they had received them. I'm sure I would have been chewed out otherwise. "I sent it. Actually, that's not right. I called Kelly since I can't call Luke." "Why can't you call Luke?" "I don't have his number," I sighed. "The kids don't keep in touch with me." I could see she didn't believe me. I resigned myself to the fact that I would have to prove it to her. My phone was on the table in front of me. I unlocked it and dialed Kelly's number. It rang 10 times on speakerphone before going to voicemail. I looked at Miri. "Could you call her, please?" "She's probably busy." She answered as an excuse, but still pulled out her phone and called on speakerphone as well. On the second ring, she was answered. "Hi, Mom. How are you doing?" asked Kelly cheerfully. "I'm fine, honey. What are you doing?" "Cassie and I are just relaxing. We're going to a party later, so we're saving our energy," replied my daughter. "Have you heard anything about your dad lately?" asked Miri, raising an eyebrow at me. "Yeah, I talked to him last night. He said he just talked to you and we chatted for about 10 minutes. I think he was going to meet with Luke today," Kelly replied, ignoring the main question. I felt my gut clench when she called Dan Dad. Miri read me and could see that the remark hurt me. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. "You mean Dan?" "Yeah, but he likes it when I call him Daddy. He's going to be a daddy in 3 weeks anyway." My daughter continued to giggle. In 3 weeks, my ex-wife was to be remarried. Believe it or not, they sent me an invitation, like I was going to show up there. "So when was the last time you spoke to your real father?" persisted Miri. "Oh, I don't know, maybe a few weeks ago." The giggly tone disappeared. I opened Kelly's call log, and Miri could see all my attempts to call. In fact, none of my kids had made a single call to me since Miri had left. That's funny because I'm sitting with him at the moment and I saw him trying to call you a minute before I did. Oh, my daughter replied intelligently. I want to remind you that you only have one daddy and Dan, don't you? We'll get to that later, young lady. Miranda was visibly upset as she interrupted the call. Why don't you have Luke's number? Dan made sure he had a spare phone and number within hours of his old phone being locked. No idea, I shrugged. Look, don't be too hard on them. They're programmed that way. I pointed to the call list on my phone. They don't need me anymore, and as you heard, I've been replaced. The remark hurt her, but it was true. I think I've talked to them for a total of an hour since you left. I haven't even been in the same zip code with them since you left. I've tried, really tried. I even got tickets to the Braves game on opening day, but Luke said he was busy, and I found out later that he and Dan and a couple other guys got tickets at the last minute. But if that's the way they want it, I'm not going to force them. We were silent in thought for a few moments before Miri changed the subject. So you're moving to be closer to your family? Not really. I'm going to look after my mom. She's needed constant care lately. Oh my God, what's wrong with her? How is your dad coping? You never said anything. Tears flooded her eyes. She has late-stage Alzheimer's. It's really bad. She doesn't remember anything 90% of the time. As for Dad, we buried him a little over 3 weeks ago. They said heart attack, but I personally think it was a broken heart. Oh no, my ex-wife cried. How do you know it was a broken heart? And why didn't you call us? I did call. In fact, the last time I talked to Kelly was the day after Thanksgiving. That's when I found out Luke had a new number, and I quickly told her she was busy and would call me back. But she never called back. I called her daily for weeks until I finally got a message. Ironically, although they blocked me on Facebook, they didn't block my dad. I found out that when she said she was busy, it was because she was going to a Black Friday sale with you and Grandma Roberts. I said this using air quotes. As for him dying of a broken heart, that's easy. I didn't tell them about our divorce. I was going to do it earlier, but I couldn't. When you left, I went to their place the following weekend to talk about it privately. When I got there, I realized how bad Mom was feeling. Dad had been telling me how forgetful she was. But from the last time I saw them at Christmas until then, she had taken a big hit. You didn't know, of course, because you couldn't come with me all the 3 years I took the kids. I couldn't resist teasing her, and we both knew the reasons for her unavailability. So I couldn't tell them, and it was getting harder and harder for me. Anyway, at Thanksgiving, after we had eaten and calmed Mom down, Dad tackled me, since he hadn't heard from you or the kids in over a year. So I told him the truth. In the morning, I found him in his favorite chair clutching a picture of the 4 of us. It was still wet from his tears. Yes, our divorce had broken his heart, after all. Mom and Dad had been married for 52 years. He was old school and expected us to be married until the day he died. It was at the funeral that I suddenly realized how alone I was in this world. The funeral was attended by just me, the chaplain, and a few neighbors. I couldn't even take my mom. She didn't understand what was going on. Within a week or two after I explained to my mom that he was gone, when she was sane enough. But I can't bear the agony she feels every time she hears it. So now I just say he popped out. Miri was already sobbing, and I had no more tears. I was empty of emotion, and had been for a long time. My gaze fell to the lone greeting card on the mantel. Miri followed my gaze and obviously noticed. I continued in the same neutral voice. I may be alone. My mom doesn't even know who I am. But I owe her a debt of gratitude for bringing me into this world. So yes, I'm packing everything up to take care of her for whatever time she has left. It's amazing the repercussions of your actions and how many people they have affected. You ruined our marriage. You ruined my relationship with my children. And you ruined my family. I finished with the venom I had promised not to show, but I just couldn't help myself. Don't you dare take it out on me. At least Dan is faithful to me. And don't forget you're the one who cheated on me and Sandy Thompson, Miranda spat back at me. I'm sure she didn't expect me to start laughing, and not just laughing, but with tears in my eyes. Oh yes, let's not forget Sandy Thompson, the reason you spent 15+ years plotting your revenge. You told me I couldn't mention her name because you'd leave me and take the kids, but I guess that ship has sailed. Yay, never touched it. Sandy Thompson, shouted I at her. When I woke up on her bed, I was still wearing the same tuxedo I wore the night before. Nothing had happened. You expect me to believe you, shouted Miri back. Of course I expect you to believe me. I've never lied to you before, and I certainly have no reason to lie to you, said I in a more muffled voice, trying to pull myself together. Whatever, she replied, sounding more like Kelly than the grown woman I was married to. For some reason, her answer irritated me. I could still see that she didn't believe me, and for some reason it was important to me that she did. I picked up the phone and, putting it on speakerphone, called my old office, where I was quickly answered by Jane's secretary. Hi, Jane, this is Alan Dowd. Oh, hi, Alan. You're all sorted now? Ready for the big move? It won't be the same here without you, replied Jane seriously. Yeah, all set. Just going to see an old friend, and then I'll hit the road. Listen, I'm trying to get in touch with an old co-worker from the Little Rock office. I'm not even sure if she still works there. Could you look into the system and see if you can find Sandy Thompson? Sure, Alan. 1 second. After a brief pause, she turned back to me. Yes. She's still there? Do you need the number, or will I connect you myself? Thanks, Jane. Just transfer, and you take care of yourself. Remember, if Paul decides to make an honest woman of you, I expect an invitation. Will do, Alan. Don't forget about us. Here you go. I'll transfer you now, said Jane with a chuckle. Miri had frowned but was now looking at me intently. Hi, Sandy, Sandy said, answering. Hi, Sandy. This is Alan Dowd from the office in Granville. I don't know if you remember me. I remember you, Lord. I've been dreaming about you for years. The man I wanted but never got. She replied, laughing. How the hell do you feel? It must be telepathy, since I've been thinking about you lately. It's probably been 16 years since we last spoke, though I've seen you on Gala a few times. But I've never had a chance to hang out with you. You know how busy we are. Actually, that was 17 years ago, though admittedly I don't remember much about that night, said I, chuckling. Oh, you were so funny that night. What do you really remember? I could hear her smiling. Well, I remember getting off stage and the champagne at the table, but I have to admit it was a little hazy from there on out. It was the first and last time I was drunk, I admitted. She laughed out loud at my answer. And you were drunk. I have to admit that I didn't take my eyes off you that night, although I'm sure I had competition from all the single ladies who were there that night. A tall, dark, attractive guy with a build like yours is like bees around a honey pot. Although being called Miri all night was a bit of a nuisance, it showed me how much you love your wife. Miri's facial expression changed drastically. She even turned a little pale. But you lasted until about 11, and then you just passed out in the chair. When it was over at 12:30, everyone had gone to their rooms and you were still there, so I asked the night porter to help me. The problem was that no one knew your room number and the hotel computers were down and not updated. You know those electric key cards don't give anything away. The only solution was to put you in my room, which, believe me, was not an easy task. I have to admit I was naughty, she said, a little embarrassed. I accidentally felt you when we were carrying you to the bed. I don't think you were even in this world when it happened. In fact, you didn't move once when we carried you in there. Anyway, I was a little drunk and very horny, so I stripped naked and lay next to you, hoping that when you saw me it would turn you on. Obviously, it didn't work, as when I woke up you were gone and no one saw you for the rest of the weekend. All I can say is that your wife was very lucky. Miri dropped her head onto her hands, realizing the enormity of what she had done. I must confess that I had no kind thoughts for her, as this all came about because of her own actions and assumptions. Her plans and payback plans over the years proved that I didn't truly know her. She is now my ex-wife, and knowing what I know now, I should have accepted your offer, I replied, chuckling. She laughed. You're 7 years too late if you were hoping for a reunion. I am now very happily married with 2 wonderful children. At work, I go by the last name Thompson, as it is recognized by all my clients, but now I am Sandy Roberts. I met Robert 8 years ago. He was the first person after you who was able to break through my defenses. At these words, Miri's head twitched, and a pained expression appeared on her face. Looking into her face, I was puzzled as I didn't understand her reaction. Rob was the reason I was thinking about you weird, huh? She said, laughing. His older brother Dan is getting married in a couple weeks, and it's all happening right in your area. Andy, his fiancée, also goes by the last name Dowd. I was wondering if she's related to you, since you're the only person with the last name Dowd I've ever met. Now I understood Miri's reaction. I can't say I have any relatives named Andy. In fact, the only relative I knew had that nickname back in high school, and she hated it so much that she would have screaming fits because she thought people would mistake her for a boy. I said this while looking intently at Miranda, who looked very ashamed. I really didn't know her anymore. No one will mistake Andy for a boy. She's gorgeous. She has kids, too, Kelly and Luke, who are in college now. Kelly and Rob's daughter Cassie are cronies and share a room in Florida. They were bridesmaids in my wedding, and Luke was an usher at Rob's. Over the years, we've met them a few times for Christmas and Thanksgiving. Rob said they've been dating for 13 years, on and off. That short statement told me a lot. It proved that her parents knew what was going on and had her back. When she wasn't around, I would always call her, and they would make up all the excuses for her, and then Miri would soon call me back. I actually don't think they should get married because it's doomed before it even starts. Why do you say that if they've been together for so long? Well, they're both serial cheaters. I mean, Dan cheated on his first wife Lisa with Andy. I don't know how he does it because Lisa was amazing too. I mean, I've never met her, but I've seen pictures. Anyway, I was talking to Andy about this topic one day, and she said that her husband and kids realize that she has a husband at work and a husband at home. She said she divides her time between the two, and her husband has a similar situation with someone he works with. I made sure Rob realized that I would cut off his manhood if he ever thought about it. Dan still has someone while he's with Andy, and always has. His current girlfriend's name is Tilly, and he sees her when he's in Chicago. And according to Rob, he goes there every 2 weeks for work. They wouldn't even be married if his bosses had told him to make an honest woman out of Andy after her birth husband sued the company when she was getting a divorce. Turns out her husband didn't have that understanding of relationships. Rob said his company had to shell out $600,000, thank you very much, and gave Dan an ultimatum. Fix the situation or he'd be out the door. Not the best basis for starting a life together, you'll agree, and with cheating and a gun pointed at him. Miri got up and ran to the bathroom, and I could hear her spitting up. I can't say I blamed her. Her perception was shattered. Honest and loyal Dan was a fake, but that was no longer my problem. I talked to Sandy for a few more minutes as she told me about her kids and what I was going to do. I found myself a job at an insurance company with a recommendation from my current company at a firm near my mom's house. Instead of sales, I would be doing investigative work, i.e. working from home. The money wasn't the same, but it was more than enough for everything I needed. It also came with an office and an assistant. Miranda came back as I was finishing my conversation with Sandy, exchanged numbers, and promised to keep in touch from time to time. My ex-wife was not in the best shape. Her face was pale, and most of her makeup was either smudged or just gone. She looked like she had aged several years in a short time. "I'm sorry, Al," she said, and I genuinely believed her. "Me too, Miranda, me too. Look, I need to get going, as I have to be in Brunswick by morning. It would be a 6-hour drive if I didn't stop, but I knew I'd stop a couple times." These boxes are yours. All the clothes, pictures, and stuff you left behind. I was going to mail them to you next week, but since you're here, I can help you load them into the car if you want. Actually, can I ask you a big favor? She didn't even look me in the eye as she spoke. Can I stay here tonight? I don't think I can come back this second. I thought about it for a few seconds, and then placed my keys on the table in front of her. What the hell? Why not? But you have to give the keys to the realtors. The exchange is a week from today, Monday, so you have 9 days if you need them. On Sunday, people will arrive to take the rest of your belongings to the dump and clean the apartment. Utilities will be in place until the same Monday. Take care of yourself, Miri, and I have to go. As I walked out, I looked back and saw a broken woman sitting at the table.